Why now watching this ex-president push those same buttons to cause and foment an insurrection now either in Florida and or in Manhattan? Why, Karen and Ben, should we allow that type of self-surrender? Why not pick him up on Monday night, either arrest him or pick him up on Monday, not as planned, but don't give him, I think he's forfeited the right to do this in an orderly manner by the way that he's abusing his bully pulpit of social media. What do you guys think?
I'd love to get Karen's perspective there, because Karen, you've had to coordinate the logistics involving very high profile cases, and you've dealt with situations out of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office involving very violent criminals, mafia, etc. So perhaps you can explain like what these considerations are from an inside perspective.
Yeah, so there is a couple of things that make this unusual and why you kind of have to give him a chance to self-surrender. Number one is the fact that he's guarded by Secret Service and law enforcement 24/7, right? So you'd have to coordinate that with the Secret Service. You can't do the surprise arrest that you would do with other people who you think are going to foment violence or, be whether it's hide evidence. There are reasons why you give someone a chance to surrender and reasons why you don't, and the reason you don't give someone a chance to surrender is A, you think they're going to flee, right? If they get noticed, they'll flee the jurisdiction, or B, they could potentially destroy evidence, and you don't want that to happen. And so that's when you go and you surprise arrest someone with an arrest warrant. Now, either way, there's going to be an arrest warrant, whether you allow someone to surrender or you do it, surprise like that. So, but in this particular instance, it's logistically kind of tricky because of the fact that he is guarded by Secret Service 24/7. So that actually could be dangerous for law enforcement to go in a way that isn't coordinated, given the fact that his Secret Service agents are all armed and are there to protect him. The other reason why it's logistically difficult to do it like that is he's in Florida, and New York law enforcement do not have jurisdiction to arrest someone in Florida. You either have to coordinate with Florida law enforcement, and they would have to do it, and then he'd be brought before a judge, or in Florida before he could be brought here, and a judge would order it, or you'd have to coordinate with the governors. Kathy Hochul and Ron DeSantis would have to coordinate. And it's just so interesting why Ron DeSantis isn't saying, you know what, go take him. Like he's clearly making some calculus there about his own presidential prospects vis-a-vis this. But that's the reason.
You see, Popok, that's why I tossed that question to Karen Friedman Agnifilo. And that's why it's important, though, to have experts providing their commentary. Because, look, as much as I would have wanted to give you my thoughts there and said, yeah, send him in, have the Secret Service arrest him. There's the considerations that Karen is talking about right there. Because, again, Karen ran that office, are exactly the real world considerations that are actually being reflected right now in the office. So there's nothing more on point than that. Popok, I know you had another point.
Just really quick, one more thing. Law enforcement, all in this regard, all law enforcement, they're going to do everything they can to de-escalate the situation so that there aren't riots, there isn't violence. I mean, one of the worst things that could happen is if all his supporters go to Mar-a-Lago and block the ability to get him out of there and turn it into almost like a compound, and then law enforcement has to go out and physically pry him out of there, occupy Mar-a-Lago, kind of what Ali Alexander was saying he's not going to do. In some ways, that's a dog whistle to people to go do that, I think. And frankly, that is tricky because there you've got a law enforcement nightmare, right? what are you going to do if he's holed up there and he's surrounded by all his supporters? They'd have who is going to go in there and pry him out of there? It's like, is Florida law enforcement going to do that? I doubt it. I think Florida likes him a lot, actually. So, I don't know that that's going to happen. So that to me is one of the nightmare situations. So law enforcement's going to do everything they can to de-escalate this, coordinate this, and see if they can persuade him to voluntarily surrender so that this doesn't turn into something way worse than just an everyday arrest. I mean, this is not that big of a deal. This is surrendering on an felony white collar crime, something that is done almost every day at the Manhattan DA's office.
Well, Karen, almost every day, that would assume, for example, on January 6th, the counting of the electoral votes is just something that happens. It's just counting.
Exactly.
It's ministerial. And here, surrendering, you would think, is just something that happens. It's routine. But already we're seeing Kevin McCarthy, for example, and the MAGA Republicans go in lockstep. Kevin McCarthy wrote, "Here we go again, an outrageous abuse of power by a radical DA who lets violent criminals walk as he pursues political vengeance against President Trump. I'm directing relevant committees to immediately investigate if federal funds are being used to subvert our democracy by interfering in elections with politically motivated prosecutions." And Kevin McCarthy is trying to further ignite the fire. Popok.
Yeah, let me take it from there. Well, let me wrap up one thing Karen said, and to answer questions that I know will be out there. He's going to come out of this. We've talked a lot about process and procedure. That's really important, and the security that's around that. Rest assured, he will get out of Mar-a-Lago. He will surrender one way or the other to Manhattan authorities in coordination with the Secret Service, and all of this other stuff around it, which could be a riot or a protest, will be handled one way or the other in the best way possible. He will then go in and be arraigned in front of a judge. He will then go out the wooden front door that day. He is not going to be held pretrial detention. He's going to come back out onto the steps of the courthouse. He is likely to give some sort of speech or commentary. We know we're not just going to see him whisked into a black, limo or SUV and taken away. We know Donald Trump. If anybody knows Donald Trump, it's MeidasTouch Network and Legal AF. He's going to give a courthouse step press conference. I'm sure he's writing it now. So he will come back out, and he will, based on this felony, he'll bond out or bail out or on his own recognizance be allowed to leave. So I don't want people to think, oh, this is great. He's going in an orange jumper right off of that arraignment. He's not. But he will then be indicted for a felony defendant in a criminal matter. And then we go into all of the first day orders related to this, setting up motion practice and what return dates and when he'll be able to, address the indictment. And we know he'll try to dismiss the indictment. I'll talk about that next. And then, in final sentencing, if he gets convicted, which everyone on this show and knowing Manhattan juries the way that Karen and I do, believe it's going to happen. That jury is going to be not a jury of his peers. It's not going to be a MAGA jury. It's going to be a jury that gets pulled appropriately from the DMV records of Manhattan. And that is a group that is not favorable to Donald Trump. And they are going to follow the lead and the evidence that's going to be presented on this relatively simple case and setting up these two crimes. The thing that all the lawyers here are really interested in getting to the bottom of is when we see the indictment is going to be, what is the second crime? The second crime that ratchets this event up from a hush money false payment recorded in the books and records of the Trump Organization into a felony. Is it, as we suspected, an election or campaign violation like the one Michael Cohen pled to? Is it money laundering? Is it tax evasion? What is the second crime? Because it's clearly this is the gearing up, the geeking up is about a felony, not about a misdemeanor. We're not going through all of these resources to pick them up on a misdemeanor. It is a felony, which means they have broken the code, the Manhattan DA's office, on the second crime on, let's say, on Monday in having the voted out indictment. If he's sentenced, it's up to 4 years. Karen has a speculation I think I saw it on one of the shows about him getting jail time. But it is up to a 4-year crime if this whole package is presented. Before we turn to Karen on what she thinks his sentence could look like, the other thrust of the campaign by Trump world in getting ready for the eventuality, the reality of indictment. And this is something that's been haunting Donald Trump for quite some time. There's been reporting that when Alan Weisselberg shuffled into the courtroom with handcuffs, with a coat covering handcuffs, and had his own version of a perp walk, it really left Trump shaken. Those around him that reported out said he was white, he was shaken, he couldn't believe it was happening. This is happening, and this is happening to Donald Trump in real time. So what his Trump world, the Habas, the Takapinas, the McCarthys, in the elected officials, they're now attacking, just like they attacked the other 2 black prosecutors involved or black officials. They're going after Alvin Bragg because he was backed by George Soros, as other progressive prosecutors were during this wave of elections in 2020 and 2021, that he's in Biden's back pocket. Let me just explain Alvin Bragg for a moment, because people have a lot of opinions about him, most of them inaccurate. Alvin ran for that job. Alvin was not in the Manhattan DA's office like Karen was. He actually ran against a person who's a friend of Karen and mine's and the show, who's now the Inspector General of the state of New York, who ran for that job, who was in the office at the time. But he had been in the office at one time. He had been a federal prosecutor, so he was known. He's a known commodity as a top prosecutor, but he wasn't in the office at the time. He ran, and the people of the city of New York, or Manhattan, elected him. The borough of Manhattan, New York, elected him because he campaigned. So he's not in anybody's back pocket. He's not Joe Biden, the Department of Justice handpicked prosecutor. He's the people of New York's handpicked prosecutor, for right or for wrong. And so that's how he got that job. He didn't get it through any other nepotism. He earned that job, and he got voted into that job. And so that's something I think is very, very important as they continue to try to attack him as being some sort of racist, just like the Fani Willis attack, just like the Letitia James attack, because they're black. So suddenly now, not understanding how racism works, they're racist because they're going after Donald Trump because he's white, apparently. No, they're going after him because he committed crimes. And that's what you're supposed to do as a prosecutor or the New York Attorney General. That he's woke. This is that new favorite attack, whatever that means. They don't even know what that means. But that he's some sort of progressive Democratic prosecutor. Well, you know what? He's in a city that voted him in on a platform that he ran on to be exactly who Alvin Bragg is. And he didn't pick this crime. He didn't pick these witnesses. They picked him. And to Karen's point on Michael Cohen is not a problem for Alvin Bragg, because all you have to say in your opening to the jury is, we didn't pick the witnesses in this case. Donald Trump picked the witnesses in this case. Michael Cohen is a witness who with facts and knowledge about what happened because Donald Trump hired him to be his inside guy, his consigliere, and to do his bidding. We didn't pick it. They did. And that's it. You're done. The jury nods their heads and say, okay, we understand. Now let's hear from Michael Cohen. So that's where we are with the combination Trump world attack and what's going to be the last and final steps in both the arraignment and hopefully the future conviction and sentencing of Donald Trump.
Karen?
Yeah, so 2 things. Just to pick up what you were saying about Alvin Bragg. By the way, when he ran for office, he ran against somebody else who paid many, many, many millions of dollars towards their own campaign, and he still beat that person. So you're 100% right that the people of Manhattan elected him based on his policies and on him and who he is. And also, if this was political, right? If this was just something political, he could have brought that other case 2 months into into office, the asset valuation case, the one where, the book came out and the prosecutors resigned. That case, if you listen to one of the prosecutors who wrote a book, Mark Pomerantz, he said that case was ready to go. Again, if this was political, he would have just done that case, but he doesn't. He's looking at the facts and bringing the crimes. But one more thing I want to just talk about the indictment. First of all, I think there's going to be at least 11 counts in the indictment, one for each of the entries in the business records. And I think there were 11 payments over time. And I think each one will be its own falsifying a business record entry. So I think you're going to see many charges here. You also might have several charges for different theories, depending on the crime. They will say he alleged to have tried to conceal or cover up. But I also have one more legal theory that I want to throw out there that I want people to think about, which is there's a lot of speculation about which crime they're using to bump this up to a felony. And I went back and I reread the statute, and it says that with the intent to defraud, your intent is to conceal or cover up another crime. So it's about your intent. It's not about committing the crime. It's about your intent to cover up or conceal a crime. So I'm going to point, this is a white collar case. So this is very much being analyzed by white collar lawyers. Well, I'm not a white collar lawyer, so I'm trying to learn to be one, but I grew up in the violent crime world. That's what I did my entire career, murders, sexual assaults, burglaries, etc. So I want everyone to think about burglary, the crime of burglary, which is trespass, right? You enter and remain somewhere unlawfully, and trespassing only gets bumped up to a burglary if you intend to commit a crime therein. Prosecutors don't have to prove which crime you intended, right? We don't know. Was this going to be a sexual assault? Was this going to be, stealing property? Was this going to be, some other crime inside there? You just have to prove that he went in not to go to sleep, right? He didn't just trespass. He went in to commit a crime with the intent to commit a crime therein. And I would argue that falsifying a business record in the first degree, which is the intent to cover up or conceal a crime, that you don't even necessarily have to prove which one it is beyond a reasonable doubt, just that he was intending to cover up a crime. And I think the fact that he structured the payments and didn't just give it, all in one check, and all the other evidence, I think, shows that this was intended to cover up a crime. So I don't think it's as difficult legally as others, but it is untested. But I think that's one of the theories that is going to get this across the finish line, no problem.
Our blue wall stopped the red wave, and election deniers got denied election. That's why we're celebrating with the new Democracy Prevails team. We've got lots of work to do, but we should all be proud that when democracy was tested, democracy prevailed. You've earned this. Don't wait. Get yours right now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.